I would like to briefly introduce a prayer called the Father Pat had referred to as the Examen of Conscience. This is a prayer that Ignatius always told his Jesuits that no matter what else they could do, if they were sick or not feeling well, they were traveling, they were working with someone, they had no time or little time to spend in long prayer, that they needed to take and never could skip their examen, which is to be done at least once a day, preferably twice a day by the Jesuits. I try to do it every day, but I'm not always successful. So I will briefly talk about what it is. One of my favorite articles and one of my favorite Jesuits was George Aschenbrenner, who was at the university for a number of years. And George wrote a paper that was published he called the Examen of Consciousness, not of conscience. And there are 5 steps in the examen, and I will talk to you briefly about them. The way that the examen proceeds, and it is a prayer that probably takes no more than 10 to 15 minutes. I find that sometimes I junk it up by making too much detail, but it is really the gift of doing the examen is that over time we begin to notice things, and with noticing things we become more aware of how we are acting, how we are behaving, what we are doing in our lives, and how we are either growing closer to God or growing farther away from God, and what we can do to try to move that forward. So we begin, with a simple Our Father, or a blessing yourself, and asking for God to give you the grace to see yourself as He sees you, and give you the grace to appreciate what has been there. The first step is thanksgiving, which is to thank God for all the things that you have that day. And it's good to recall them, bring them to mind in some respect. It may be to think about someone who held the door open for you when your arms were full. It may be about, your spouse providing you with a cup of coffee that day when you were, down, or someone giving you a kind word or a smile. Ignatius asks us to be concrete in thinking about what we have to be thankful for. The second step is to ask God to help us see our sinfulness. This is not necessarily in terms of that I'm bad or I'm an evil person. One of Ignatius' strong statements in the first week of the exercises, when you do the whole exercise, is devoted to learning that you are a loved sinner. So if we do not recognize that we are sinners and have sinfulness in our nature, then it's hard to recognize that you are loved even in your sinfulness. So calling to mind that I am a sinner, or that I can sin. Third step is to look at your day and to think about parts of the day and what went on during those times. The fourth step is to look at those times and say, where was I with those times? Where did I perform well? Where did I get closer to God? And where did I find myself pulling away from God? Where was I resistant? Where did I not want to go that God was leading me? These are important steps. Now, this does not mean you have to recreate Groundhog Day and relive every day 24 hours over and over and over again the same day. What we're asking, or what Ignatius is telling us to do, is to look at our day and think, what were the high points? What were the low points? It's kind of like looking back and saying, where did I feel good? Where did I feel bad? Where was I challenged? How did I meet that challenge? And then the fifth step, to take time to look at yourself and resolve that you will try to do better tomorrow, that you will make amends for what you did wrong, that you will learn from what you did wrong, and also learn from what you did right. What God is hoping that we will do is to begin to more and more see ourselves as we really are, in our sinfulness, in our goodness. We are not all bad or all good. We have moments when we're wonderful. We have moments when we fail because we're human beings. And so we are asked to look at those moments and to make amends and try to do better going forward. And so we ask God for that grace. As you begin to pray the Examen and do it over and over again, you begin to notice patterns, trends, and become aware of what you are doing. These things then become guideposts for us. So if I find that I'm doing something that I know when I look back on other times has led me to trouble or gotten me, away from God, then as I start going down that path, I get that little nagging feeling that, you know what, this never turns out well, or this turns out badly when you go down this path. And so I have the opportunity to, over time, begin to recognize this more and more and change my actions or my attitudes before I do something that would be leading me away from God. And finally, one of the things that I think is the greatest gift of this is that it involves use of our memory. As we're going through something in life, we don't always necessarily see what's going on. We don't always appreciate it. Though when we look back at a later date or a later time, we have had the benefit of wisdom, we have the benefit of time, we have the benefit of the slow work of God showing us, revealing to us where we are headed, what we're becoming. So that kind of hindsight, the ability to look back and see what the consequences of an action were, helps us to fulfill that action, helps us to know how to act better in the future.